The year was 1865, and the wind carried the voice of winter like a mourning widow, sharp, relentless, and laced with sorrow. Snow tore sideways across the Wyoming mountains, and the trees creaked like old bones under the weight of ice. Somewhere in that white blur, a figure stumbled forward, her dress soaked through and torn at the hem, clinging to her legs like frostbitten chains. Clara Bennett pressed her arm to her ribs, feeling the warmth of blood still trickling beneath her bodice. Her breath came in ragged bursts, visible against the gray sky. Each step was a prayer, each breath a defiance. Behind her, no sounds, just endless white and her own ragged trail vanishing in the storm. She had run until her legs gave out, crawled until her fingers bled. The last thing she remembered was the taste of snow on her tongue, and the way the world tilted sideways as she fell face first into it. When she woke, the fire had already burned halfway down in the hearth. She was in a cabin, one room, warm and dim. A bearskin was draped over her, thick and heavy with the scent of smoke and musk. Her boots had been removed. Her dress had been covered modestly with a gray blanket. The pain in her side pulsed like a drum, but she was alive. The door creaked open, and a man stepped inside. Tall, shoulders broad as timber beams. Snow clung to the ends of his long coat. His hair was dark, unkempt, wet from the storm. A rifle hung across his back, and a string of rabbits dangled in his left hand. He looked at her just once, then set the rabbits on the table without a word and moved to stoke the fire. "Where am I?" Her voice cracked, barely more than a breath. He didn't look at her right away. "Cabin, 2 miles south of Dead Elk Pass." "Who are you?" "Name's Kane." She blinked. "You saved me." His eyes flicked to her. "You were about to be part of the mountain. Figured you wouldn't like that." She tried to sit up. Pain shot through her ribs, and a gasp escaped her lips. Kane moved quickly, steadying her with a strong arm, but never touching her more than needed. There was no lingering, no leer in his eyes. Just cold practicality. "You broke a rib. Maybe 2. Fever's gone, though. You've been out 3 days." 3 days. The number spun in her mind like a coin. She remembered the riverbank, the horse thrown from under her, the chase through the trees, the echo of Jonas Avery's voice, dripping with threats and charm. A shotgun in his hand, a ring in the other, a preacher's impatient sigh. She clenched her fists in the blanket. "I have to go." Kane said nothing. He poured steaming water into a tin cup from a kettle and handed it to her. "You can't walk to town. Not like that. Not through this." "I don't care. I can't stay here." He sat across from her in the single wooden chair by the hearth. "There a bounty on you?" "No." "Then maybe you tell me what you're running from." She hesitated. The fire cracked between them. The warmth on her face contrasted the ice still clinging to her memories. "A man. He wanted me to marry him. I didn't." Kane gave a slow nod. "Doesn't sound like he took kindly to that." "I said no." She looked away. He took it as a negotiation. The silence after that was heavy, but not cruel. Kane didn't ask for more. He just sat there, eyes half-lidded like he'd heard 100 stories like it before. Outside, the storm still raged. Wolves cried in the distance. "You can rest here, long as you need." His voice was even, unreadable. "I didn't ask for your help. Didn't say you did." She wanted to hate that answer, wanted to throw the cup at him and storm out. But her body trembled, too weak to even stand. Her pride warred with exhaustion, and exhaustion won. That night, Clara lay on the narrow cot beside the hearth while Kane slept on the floor near the door. He faced away from her, one hand on the rifle, boots still on. There was no sense of danger from him, but no warmth either. Just distance, like he had built walls around himself, so high even the fire didn't dare flicker too close. She didn't sleep. Not really. Her mind wandered to a church half-built on the edge of town, to a preacher paid off with whiskey and threats, to Jonas Avery's smile as he lifted the ring from his father's finger and slipped it on her bruised one. She'd run from that altar with blood on her lip and her mama's silver cross clenched in her fist. And now she was here, in a stranger's cabin, under a stranger's roof. The next morning, Kane was already outside when she woke. She heard the rhythmic scrape of a saw, the sound of wood splitting. She found a coat folded beside her and a pair of boots set by the fire. Hers, but cleaned. Her dress had been mended crudely with black thread. She stepped outside, pulling the coat around her. The cold hit her like a slap. Cain was chopping wood, barehanded in the snow, steam rising from his skin. He barely acknowledged her. "You planning to make this permanent?" she asked. He paused. "You mean keeping you here?" "I mean living like this. All alone. In the woods." He shoved another log onto the stump. "Not much for people. People lie. Steal. Start wars. Sounds like you've known the wrong kind. I fought with the Union out east. Watched good men bleed out for inches of mud. Watched worse men get medals." He slammed the axe down. "Figure the trees don't lie." She didn't know what to say to that. That afternoon, they sat across from each other, eating stew in silence. Clara studied him now, not just his face, but the things he didn't say. He had the look of someone who had lost more than he let on. She noticed a small child's doll tucked behind a stack of old books, barely visible, and a woman's shawl draped across the back of a broken chair. She set her spoon down. This used to be someone else's cabin. Cain didn't look up. Was mine. Still is. The shawl. The doll. He exhaled slowly. My wife. Daughter. Fever took him 3 winters back. Something in her chest twisted. "I'm sorry." He nodded once. "I ain't good company, Miss Bennett. I don't talk much. Don't smile much either. But I won't harm you. That I swear." She believed him. The next few days blurred together. She regained strength slowly, helped around the cabin, kept the fire going. Cain taught her how to set snares, how to walk quietly in the snow, how to tell a storm from just a bluff. She asked questions. He answered sometimes. And then came the day when the wind died, and Cain stood by the window with a tight jaw. "They're coming," he said. "Who?" "Men. 4 of them. On horses. One of 'em's wearing black gloves." "That your Jonas?" Her heart plummeted. "Yes." Cain checked his rifle, loaded 3 rounds, then grabbed his second weapon and handed it to her. "I've never," she began. "You might have to." The sound of hooves outside. Boots hitting the snow. A man's voice called out, "Clara, you in there?" Cain said nothing. He stood between her and the door, steady as the mountain itself. The door flew open without warning. Jonas Avery stood there in a long wool coat, smug as ever. Behind him, 2 ranch hands and a town preacher. The sheriff, too, clutching his hat awkwardly. "Well now," Jonas said, "what a situation. Town's been talking. A lady like you. Hold up with a man out here. Folks don't take kindly to scandal." Clara stepped forward. "I came here because I was dying." Jonas ignored her. "This man took you. Against your will. We can settle this one way or another. I say we make it right." Cain raised the rifle a fraction. "She's under my protection." "That's cute," Jonas sneered. "But the law says otherwise. She's been living in a man's cabin alone. That ain't proper. Ain't holy. Preacher, tell em." The preacher stepped forward. "Miss Bennett, you've been compromised. Best thing for your soul is to marry the man and cleanse the sin." "I'm not marrying anyone." Clara shouted. Jonas smiled. "You already did. In my heart, you did. But seeing as he's the one took you, I'm willing to be generous." The sheriff finally spoke. "Cain, the town's watching. This needs settling. One way or the other. A woman alone with a man, it don't look right." Cain looked at Clara. His jaw clenched. His hands didn't shake. But his voice was low. "You want me to say no? I'll say it." Clara felt heat rise to her face. Rage. Shame. Confusion. They were boxing her in again, calling it protection, but tying her to a cage. Jonas. The preacher. The law. All pressing down like the storm. And Cain. Cain had saved her, fed her, never touched her without need, stood there willing to take a bullet for her, or a vow. She looked at the men. Then at Cain. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. "You want a wedding?" she said. "Fine, but don't expect me to smile." Jonas frowned. Cain didn't move, didn't blink. The preacher opened his Bible. The storm outside had stopped, but the one inside had just begun. Cain didn't flinch when the preacher began speaking. Snow melted in rivulets down the barrel of his rifle, the only thing between him and the cold stares of the townsfolk. The log walls of the cabin bore silent witness as the preacher opened his Bible with trembling fingers, and Clara stood beside Cain like stone, her spine straight despite the storm brewing in her chest. The word came flat and heavy. "Do you, Wyatt Kane, take this woman, Clara Bennett, to be your lawful wedded wife, before God and man?" Kane glanced at her once, his jaw clenched but his voice calm. "Ain't my choice if I say no." "That a yes?" the preacher pressed. Kane gave the barest nod. "Yes." Clara felt her hands go numb. The preacher turned to her. "Do you, Clara Bennett, take this man, Wyatt Kane?" "I take no one," she snapped, cutting the man off, her voice sharp as broken glass. "This ain't a marriage. It's a trap with a prayer tacked on." The preacher faltered, looking to Jonas, who smiled behind his gloves, and then to the sheriff. The older man shifted uncomfortably, hat twisting in his hands. "It's done," Jonas said smoothly. "Ain't no need for rings or fancy words. Everyone here heard it. She's his now." He looked at Clara, eyes gleaming. "Guess you're off my conscience." Kane's hand tightened around the rifle. Clara stared at Jonas, her chest burning. "Don't pretend you had a conscience to begin with." Jonas tipped his hat, then turned. "We'll let the town know it's settled. Preacher, sheriff." He paused at the door. "You two enjoy your honeymoon." And just like that, they left. Silence descended. The fire crackled in protest. Clara stood unmoving, eyes locked on the snow-covered threshold where freedom had vanished. Again, Kane lowered the rifle and moved away, his boots thudding against the wooden floor. He didn't look at her. "You should eat," he muttered. "Storm will keep us in again by nightfall." She didn't move, didn't blink. Finally, her voice came in a whisper. "You could have said no." Kane turned slowly. His expression was hard to read, but his eyes carried something, guilt, maybe, weariness. And give him a reason to shoot? Didn't see a choice. There's always a choice. He pulled the stew pot from the hearth and poured it into 2 bowls. "Not out here. Not with that man breathing down our throats." She stepped toward him. "You didn't fight. You just stood there, like I was something handed off between men." Kane's spoon stopped midway to his mouth. He set it down. "You want me to fight for you?" he asked quietly. "Would that change anything? You'd still be shackled to someone. Only difference is whether I'm bleeding while it happens." "That's not the point," she said. "Then what is?" "That I was finally free," she whispered, her voice cracking. "For 3 days in this place, I wasn't someone's daughter, wasn't someone's possession, and now I'm right back to it. Even if you're not like him, it doesn't matter." They made it true. Kane looked away. "I didn't ask for this." "No," she said. "You just didn't stop it." The silence after that was colder than the wind outside. Clara sat alone near the fire, her bowl untouched. Kane busied himself near the door, checking supplies, reinforcing the windows. They didn't speak again that night, but sleep didn't come easy. Clara lay on the cot, wrapped in the bear pelt, eyes open. The weight of that false vow sat on her chest like stone. Her body ached with the memory of past hands, past threats, past cages. Kane's shadow moved by the fire. He sat, whittling something in his hands. She heard the quiet scrape of knife on wood. "You ever love her?" Clara asked. He paused. "My wife," he said after a while. "Yeah, I did." "What was her name?" "Mara." There was a beat of silence. "She likes sunflowers," he said, voice soft now. "Planted 'em every spring by the window. Even when the frost came early, she'd plant anyway. Said maybe hope's stubborn enough to bloom through ice." Clara stared at the flames. "What happened?" "Fever took her. Took her daughter too. I buried him out by the pine tree with a twist in its trunk." Her throat tightened. "I'm sorry." He nodded. "Don't want pity. Just it don't sit right. This." He gestured between them. "What they did. It doesn't sit right with me either." Kane tossed the carved scrap into the fire. "I ain't to skin anything from you. You can stay here till spring, or leave tomorrow if your leg lets you. You won't hear a word from me either way." That should have comforted her, but it didn't. Days passed. They lived beside each other, not with. Kane went about his chores in silence. Clara cooked, cleaned, kept busy. The cabin wasn't big enough to avoid each other, but they tried. Then came the wolf. Clara was in the yard, hanging what little laundry they had when she heard the growl. Kane had gone to check his snares. She turned. It was there. Massive. Gray. Wild yellow eyes. It bared its teeth and lunged. She barely had time to scream. Cain's voice bellowed across the clearing, and then he was there, slamming into the beast with the weight of fury. The wolf snarled, jaws snapping. Cain wrestled it to the ground, knife flashing. Blood hit the snow like spilled ink. The wolf collapsed. Cain stumbled back, clutching his arm. Blood soaked through his sleeve. Clara ran to him. "You're hurt." "It's nothing. Don't lie." She helped him inside. He was pale, teeth gritted in pain. The bite was deep, angry and red. They spent the night tending it. She cleaned the wound, stitched it with trembling fingers. He winced, but never complained. "You're the most stubborn man I've ever met," she whispered. "Comes with being alone too long." She tied the bandage. "Why'd you do it?" He looked at her, confused. "The wolf," she said. "You could have let it have me." Cain's eyes met hers. "Because you were the first voice I'd heard in years that didn't sound like ghosts." She stared at him, tears stinging her eyes. "You talk like a man who wants to disappear." "Maybe I did." He reached for her hand, slowly. "But you walked out of the woods like a storm. And for a moment, it felt like I remembered how to breathe again." She didn't pull away. The next morning, Cain had a fever. Bad one. He thrashed in his sleep, calling names she didn't know. Clara sat by his side, wiping his brow, her heart tight. She knew she couldn't handle it alone. Not out here. So she made a decision. She saddled his horse, packed supplies, and took his pistol. "I'll be back," she whispered, brushing a hand over his hair. "Don't die on me now." Then she rode. The trip to town was brutal. Snow thick, trail half buried. Her hands went numb on the reins. Wolves howled in the distance, but she kept moving. By the time she reached town, the sky was darkening. She walked into the general store, gasping from cold, dress torn from the ride. And Jonas was there. He turned, smiled like nothing had changed. "Clara, heard you were a bride now." Her hand went to the pistol inside her coat. "He's sick. I need the doctor." "You need a lot of things," he said, stepping closer. "But I don't recall asking what you wanted. Get out of my way. You think I won't drag you back? Try." He reached for her arm. She pulled the gun and fired. The bullet tore into the floor inches from his boot. Men shouted. Jonas stumbled back, eyes wide. "I'm not your wife. I'm not anyone's. I'm done being claimed like land." The sheriff entered moments later. Saw the gun. Saw Jonas. Clara turned to him. "I need help, not judgment." The sheriff stared long, then nodded. "I'll get Doc Simmons." She lowered the gun. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft this time. Gentle, like ash. She looked at her hands. They weren't trembling anymore. And for the first time, Clara Bennett felt like she was someone no one could push. Not anymore. She rode back with the doctor that same night, lanterns swinging from the saddle. Cain's fever had worsened. He mumbled names. Called out for Mara. For his daughter. For Clara. The doc worked through the night. Clara helped. Never left his side. When the sun finally rose, Cain's eyes opened. And the first thing he saw was her hand wrapped around his. "I came back," she whispered. He tried to speak. She stopped him. "Don't say anything. Not yet." Outside, the sun glinted off the snow, and the storm had passed. But inside, something new was blooming. Something not born of obligation, but choice. The snow glistened beneath the rising sun like blood rubbed into linen. Frozen, hidden, but impossible to forget. Clara watched Cain sleep, his breath shallow but steady now. The doctor had left an hour before, packing his bag with weary hands, shaking his head at the town that drove people into the wild and called it justice. Cain murmured her name in sleep, quiet, soft. She didn't move, just sat beside him, fingers clutching the edges of the blanket like a woman guarding a flame against wind. Outside, the sky stretched blue and endless, but it felt fragile, like one wrong move could crack it open and drown them both in cold. She walked outside to clear her head. The trees whispered overhead. Somewhere beyond them, life kept going. Townsfolk likely whispering over biscuits and Bible verses about the fallen woman up in the hills and the drifter they forced her onto. They didn't know about the fever, or the wolves, or the kindness stitched into every silence Cain offered. Clara tightened her coat and mounted his horse. The ride down was slow, cautious. She had only one thought in her mind, Jonas. He wouldn't stop, not after she'd humiliated him. She could feel him, looming in the back of her skull like a vulture waiting for the final limp. The town's main street looked the same as always. Muddy tracks through packed snow, the livery silent, the general store shuttered half-closed. She dismounted, pistol in her coat, and stepped onto the porch of the sheriff's office. Sheriff Trumbull looked up as she entered. His mustache twitched like it always did when he was unsettled. "I ain't here to make trouble," she said, before he could speak. "You just shooting up floorboards again, then?" he replied dryly. She didn't smile. "I want to know if Jonas Avery's been nosing around. I need to know if I have time to leave before he comes knocking." The sheriff leaned back. "He's been sulking round the saloon like a kicked dog. But I don't think he's done. Men like Jonas, they don't take kindly to being embarrassed. Especially not by a woman." She stared at him. "So what are you going to do about it?" "I'd like to help, Miss Bennett. But he's got his father's name, and that still means something in this town. I gotta weigh peace against justice, and it ain't always easy." She stepped forward, voice low. "Then let me make it easier. I'm not a skin for a gun. Just a word. You tell Jonas that if he rides into those woods, he best bring a preacher for his own funeral." Trumbull stared, surprised by the calm steel in her voice. Then he gave a single, grim nod. She left without waiting for thanks. By the time she returned to the cabin, Kane was up, if barely. He sat on the edge of the cot, legs hanging, the bear pelt wrapped around his shoulders. "You shouldn't be sitting," she said, crossing to him. "I heard the horse," he said. "Figured I'd best look alive in case it weren't you." She helped him lie back. His face was pale but clearer. "You scared me," she whispered. "Didn't mean to." "I know." He reached out, taking her hand in his. His grip was weak, but the intent was strong. "You came back." She nodded. "Always would have." Kane looked at her for a long while, like he was memorizing her face. "Don't know what kind of world we're left in after all this," he murmured. "But if I get to share it with you, it won't be wasted." She didn't answer, just leaned in and kissed him, softly, slow. This time not because she owed anything. This time it was hers to give. That night, she watched the tree line more than the fire. Jonas was a prideful man, not a patient one. She could feel it like the air before a lightning strike. She didn't have to wait long. Just past midnight, the sharp snap of a branch cracked through the woods. Kane stirred behind her, but she motioned for him to stay down. She moved to the window, slowly, carefully, for figures crept through the trees. Jonas at the front, two of his men behind, rifles slung, and the preacher. Clara opened the door before they could knock. "Well now," Jonas said, grinning through the dark. "Ain't you just the queen of the mountain?" "I'm tired, Jonas. Whatever you think you're here to fix, you're not." "Oh, I ain't here to fix. I'm here to collect." He stepped forward. Clara raised the pistol in one smooth motion. "Try," she said. "Please." Jonas stopped. His smile flickered. "You shoot me," he said, "and my boys burn this place to ash. You come any closer, and I shoot you anyway. Don't think I care much for ashes." The preacher cleared his throat. "Miss Bennett, please. We came to speak peaceably. Peace was 4 days ago. You all missed it." The two ranch hands fidgeted behind Jonas. They weren't killers. Not really. Just men used to being told who to point at. Jonas' voice turned cold. "You think he's going to protect you?" Man can barely stand. Kane's voice came from behind her, low and gravelly, but clear. "Try me." Jonas blinked as Kane stepped into the firelight, bandaged, holding a shotgun steady with both hands. His skin was gray, but his eyes burned. "You look half dead," Jonas sneered. "Then count your blessings," Kane said. "'Cause if I was whole, you'd already be 6 feet under." Jonas started to speak, but Kane didn't wait. "This ends now. You ride out. You never come back. Or I put you down, and I make sure the law calls it clean." The preacher held up a hand. "Now let's not be hasty. Perhaps." "You married us," Clara said, voice bitter. "You sold your God for a rifle and gossip. So don't stand there quoting scripture now." Jonas took a step back. "You'd really kill me? I should have done it the night I ran." They stared at each other for one long breath. Then Jonas lowered his hand, turned to his men. "Mount up." They hesitated, then obeyed. Clara didn't lower the gun until the hooves faded. Her hand trembled, just once before she holstered it. Kane slumped against the doorframe. She rushed to him, catching him as he stumbled. "You shouldn't have stood," she scolded, tears stinging her eyes. I wasn't going to let him take you. You were barely on your feet. I'm yours. Ain't that what marriage is? She helped him back to the cot. That was the first time you said it, she murmured. Said what? Yours. Kane closed his eyes. First time I believed it. They didn't speak the rest of the night. Didn't need to. The morning came quietly, soft snow falling over the trail. The trees were dusted and white. The wolves were silent. Clara stepped outside and looked up at the sun breaking over the hills. She took the shawl Mara once wore and wrapped it around her shoulders. Then she started clearing the path toward the old pine tree. Kane joined her an hour later, limping but upright. She pointed at the bare earth beneath the tree's twist. Spring's coming, she said. Kane looked at the soil, then at her. You gonna plant something? She smiled. Yeah, I think I will. He took her hand. Behind them, the cabin stood solid against the mountains. No longer just a shelter, now a home,